Studio microphone. Have you ever sat at the same dinner table with someone who made you feel completely invisible? My name is Ethan Carter, and for almost 28 years, my father believed I would never become anything. To him, I wasn't smart enough, successful enough, or worthy enough to carry the Carter family name. Every family gathering felt like a courtroom, and my father was always the judge. "Look at your brother," he would say. "He has a great career, respect, and a bright future. Then look at you." The room would fall silent. No one defended me. Not my mother. Not my relatives. Not even my younger sister. I would simply force a smile and pretend those words no longer hurt. But they always did. The truth was, my father had no idea where I disappeared every few weeks. He assumed I was working random jobs because I had failed in life. Whenever someone asked about me, he would laugh. "My son," he would say. "He's still trying to figure out what to do with his life." Everyone would politely laugh along. But what none of them knew was that I had spent the last 6 years building something in complete silence. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted my success to speak louder than my words. I never told anyone about my achievements. I never showed off. I never corrected their assumptions. Then one invitation changed everything. It was my father's 60th birthday celebration. Almost every member of our family would be there. My father planned to introduce my older brother as the future of the Carter family. According to him, I was just another disappointment. But before that night came to an end, everyone in that room would discover a truth that would leave them speechless. And my father's world would never be the same again. Growing up in the Carter household meant living under impossible expectations. My father believed that success was the only thing that gave a person value. If you earned top grades, you deserved praise. If you made money, you earned respect. If you failed, you became invisible. My older brother, Daniel, was everything my father had ever wanted. He graduated with honors, joined the family business, and always knew exactly what to say. Family friends admired him. Relatives praised him. And my father couldn't stop talking about him. Then there was me. I wasn't lazy. I simply dreamed of building something different. While Daniel wanted to inherit the family business, I wanted to create my own path. That difference was enough for my father to label me as a failure. "You'll never survive on your own," he used to say. "One day you'll come begging for a job." Those words stayed with me for years. After finishing high school, I decided not to attend the expensive university my father had chosen for me. Instead, I took online courses, learned business, marketing, and software development, and worked small freelance jobs to support myself. When my father found out, he was furious. He told everyone I had thrown my future away. From that day on, he introduced me as his uneducated son. Every family gathering became another opportunity for him to remind everyone how disappointed he was. At first, I tried to defend myself. Then I realized something important. People who refuse to listen will never understand your explanation. So I stopped arguing. I smiled. I stayed quiet. And I focused on my work. Every insult became motivation. Every joke became fuel. While everyone believed I was wasting my life, I was quietly building a business from a tiny apartment with an old laptop, unreliable internet, and a dream that refused to die. There were nights when I questioned everything. Bills piled up. Clients disappeared. Projects failed. More than once, I thought about giving up. But every time I remembered my father's words, "You'll never become anything," instead of breaking me, those words pushed me to work even harder. I made myself one promise. One day, I wouldn't prove him wrong with an argument. I would prove him wrong with results. The first year was the hardest. I worked from a tiny one-bedroom apartment with peeling paint, an old wooden desk, and a laptop that crashed almost every day. My entire office could fit inside a single corner of the room. During the day, I completed freelance projects for small businesses. At night, I studied everything I could find about entrepreneurship, leadership, and technology. While most people were sleeping, I was still awake, chasing a future no one else could see. There were weeks when I barely had enough money to pay the rent. Some nights, dinner was nothing more than instant noodles and a cup of coffee. I wasn't living comfortably. I was surviving. Then came the setbacks. A client disappeared without paying me. Another company canceled a project after months of work. One business partner walked away just days before we were supposed to launch our first product. For a moment, it felt like my father had been right all along. Maybe I really was chasing an impossible dream. Maybe everyone who doubted me had seen something I couldn't. I sat alone in my apartment that night, staring at my computer screen, wondering if it was finally time to quit. But deep inside, a small voice kept telling me one thing. Keep going. So I did. Instead of giving up, I learned from every mistake. I improved my skills. I built stronger connections. I listened to successful people instead of negative opinions. Slowly, things began to change. One satisfied client recommended me to another. That client introduced me to an investor. The investor believed in my vision. For the first time in years, someone looked at me and saw potential instead of failure. That single opportunity changed everything. Within 2 years, my small freelance business had grown into a real company. We hired our first employee. Then 5 more. Then 20. Our clients came from different cities. Then different countries. Money was no longer my biggest concern. Building something meaningful became my new purpose. Yet I never told my family. Not because I hated them, but because I wanted the truth to reveal itself at the right moment. I knew that day would eventually come. And when it did, no explanation would be necessary. My success would tell the entire story. 3 months later, my phone buzzed while I was finishing a meeting with one of our biggest international clients. It was a message from my mother. Your father's 60th birthday is next Saturday. The whole family will be here. Please come, it would mean a lot to me. I stared at the screen for several seconds. I hadn't attended a family gathering in almost a year. Not because I was angry. Because I was tired. Tired of being compared. Tired of being judged. Tired of pretending their words didn't hurt. I almost ignored the invitation. But something told me this time would be different. So I replied with a single word. I'll be there. The following week passed quickly. My company had just signed one of the biggest contracts in its history. Our team celebrated. Everyone congratulated me. Some even suggested I buy a luxury car or a larger house to celebrate the milestone. I smiled. But I wasn't interested in showing off. Success had taught me something important. Real confidence doesn't need an audience. On Saturday evening, I drove to my parents' house. Not in a flashy sports car. Just in a clean, simple black SUV. I parked a few houses away and walked the rest of the distance. As I reached the front door, I could already hear laughter from inside. The house was full. My uncles. My aunts. My cousins. Old family friends. Everyone had come to celebrate my father's birthday. The moment I stepped inside, several people looked in my direction. Some smiled politely. Others whispered to each other. I could almost guess what they were thinking. He's finally decided to show up. Before I could even take off my jacket, my father walked over. He looked me up and down before forcing a smile. Well, you actually came. I wasn't sure you'd have time between all those little jobs you're always doing. A few people laughed quietly. I simply smiled. It's good to see you too, Dad. He handed me a tray of drinks. Since you're not exactly busy with an important career, why don't you help serve the guests? The room filled with awkward laughter. Years ago, those words would have crushed me. But not anymore. I calmly took the tray without saying a single word. Because I knew something they didn't. Within the next few hours, everything they believed about me was about to change forever. The evening continued as if nothing had changed. I quietly helped serve drinks, greeted relatives, and stayed out of everyone's conversations. From across the room, I could hear my father proudly talking about Daniel. My eldest son has done everything right, he said with a smile. One day, he'll take over everything I've built. The guests applauded. Daniel stood beside him, accepting the compliments as if the future had already been written. Then my father looked in my direction. And Ethan? He paused for a moment. I still hope he'll eventually find a real job. The room erupted with uncomfortable laughter. A few relatives looked away. Others shook their heads with sympathy. I simply smiled and continued placing glasses on the table. My mother quietly walked over to me. I'm sorry, she whispered. You deserve better than this. I gently squeezed her hand. It's okay, Mom. For the first time in years. I truly meant those words. Because I wasn't there to seek anyone's approval. A few minutes later, my phone vibrated. It was a message from my assistant. Mr. Carter, the board members have arrived at the hotel. They're waiting for your confirmation before signing the final agreement. I typed a quick reply. Please give me another hour. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. No one around me had any idea that a multi-million-dollar business deal was waiting for my signature. To them, I was still the family disappointment. As dinner came to an end, my father stood up and tapped his glass. The room became silent. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, he began. This birthday is special because I also have an important family announcement. He placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. Starting next month, Daniel will officially become the future leader of our family business. Everyone clapped loudly. Then my father smiled proudly and added, the Carter legacy is finally in safe hands. The applause grew even louder. I joined in with a polite clap. Then something unexpected happened. One of the guests near the entrance suddenly stood up. He looked around the room. Then his eyes stopped on me. A smile spread across his face. Without saying a word, he began walking directly toward me. And the entire room fell silent. The room became so quiet that you could hear the soft music playing in the background. Every guest turned toward the man walking through the crowd. He was wearing a tailored navy blue suit and carried himself with the confidence of someone who was used to making important decisions. No one in my family recognized him. But I did. His name was Richard Hayes. He was the chairman of one of the largest investment firms our company had ever worked with. Just 2 days earlier, we had spent 6 hours negotiating our biggest partnership. Richard walked straight toward me. Then, in front of everyone, he smiled and extended his hand. Mr. Carter, he said warmly. I've been trying to reach you all evening. I shook his hand. It's good to see you again, Richard. The expressions around the room changed instantly. My father frowned. Daniel looked completely confused. One of my uncles whispered. How does Ethan know someone like him? Richard laughed. I hope I'm not interrupting the celebration. I smiled. Not at all. Then Richard looked around the room. I just wanted to personally congratulate you. Our board has unanimously approved the partnership. Once you sign the agreement tonight, your company will officially begin its largest international expansion. The silence became even heavier. Several relatives stared at me as if they had heard the wrong name. My father cleared his throat. I'm sorry. I think you've mistaken my son for someone else. Richard looked surprised. Mistaken? He smiled politely. No, sir. This is Ethan Carter, the founder and chief executive officer of Carter Digital Solutions. Our company has been looking forward to working with him for months. No one said a single word. My father slowly turned toward me. His face had gone completely pale. The CEO? He asked quietly. I nodded. Yes, Dad. I started the company 6 years ago. I just never felt the need to talk about it. Gasps echoed across the room. The same relatives who had laughed at me only minutes earlier were now staring in complete disbelief. Daniel looked speechless. My father opened his mouth to say something. But for the first time in my entire life, he couldn't find a single word. The silence in the room lasted for what felt like an eternity. No one moved. No one spoke. Every pair of eyes was fixed on me. My father looked as though the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. You started a company? He asked quietly. 6 years ago, I replied. And today, it employs more than 200 people across 3 countries. A wave of whispers spread through the room. 200 employees. 3 countries. Is this really Ethan? Richard smiled proudly. That's actually an old number. He turned toward the guests. The company has grown much faster than anyone expected. Their technology is now used by businesses around the world. One of my uncles couldn't hide his curiosity. If that's true, why didn't you ever tell us? I took a deep breath before answering. Because every time I tried to share a dream, I was told it would never work. So I stopped talking. I decided that one day, my results would speak louder than my words. The room became silent once again. Even Daniel lowered his head. For years, he had accepted every compliment while I quietly accepted every insult. My mother wiped away tears. I always knew you were working hard, she whispered. I just never imagined it was something this incredible. I smiled gently. Thank you, Mom. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and placed a small black folder on the dining table. Inside were photographs of our offices, newspaper interviews, business awards, and letters of appreciation from clients around the world. One by one, the relatives picked them up. Their expressions changed from curiosity to disbelief, and finally, to respect. The same people who had ignored me for years were now asking questions about my company, my journey, and my future plans. But I wasn't interested in proving that I was successful. I wanted them to understand something much more important. A person's value should never be measured by someone else's opinion. Sometimes, the quietest person in the room is carrying the biggest dream. And sometimes, the one everyone calls a failure is simply writing a success story that no one has read yet. For several long moments, no one spoke. The laughter that had filled the house earlier had completely disappeared. Instead, the room was filled with silence. Not the awkward silence of embarrassment, but the heavy silence that comes when people realize they were completely wrong. My father slowly picked up one of the awards from the folder. His hands were shaking. He looked at the company logo. Then at me. Why? He asked softly. Why didn't you tell me any of this? I looked into his eyes. Would you have believed me? He didn't answer. Because we both already knew the truth. If I had told him years ago that I was starting my own company, he would have laughed. If I had said investors believed in me, he would have called me naive. If I had said one day my business would become international, he would have said I was dreaming too big. So instead of arguing, I simply went to work. Richard smiled. I've worked with many successful entrepreneurs, he said. But Ethan is different. He never bragged about his success. He always gave credit to his team. And he never treated anyone with disrespect. That's why people enjoy working with him. Several relatives nodded quietly. One of my cousins finally spoke. "Ethan, we're proud of you." Another uncle added. "You've achieved something truly remarkable." I smiled politely. "Thank you. But I didn't come here to impress anyone. I came because this is still my family." Then I turned toward my father. "I spent years trying to earn your approval. I thought if I worked harder, studied more, or became more successful, you'd finally be proud of me." I paused for a moment. But eventually I realized something. No achievement can fill the space where unconditional love should have been. Tears filled my mother's eyes. Several relatives quietly looked down at the floor. My father stood there without saying a word. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the one giving a lecture. He was the one learning the lesson. My father stood in complete silence. The confident man who had spent years judging every decision I made suddenly looked lost. He took a slow step toward me. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. The room remained perfectly still. I spent so many years believing success only looked one way. I thought following my path was the only path. I never stopped to understand yours. His voice began to shake. "And because of that, I failed you as a father." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I had imagined this conversation 1,000 times. I thought that if he ever apologized, all the pain would instantly disappear. But life doesn't work that way. Some wounds heal slowly. Others leave scars that never completely fade. I looked at him and answered honestly. "Dad, I don't need a perfect father. I only needed one who believed in me." Tears rolled down my mother's face. Even Daniel looked emotional. He stepped forward and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry too," he said. "I should have stood beside you instead of enjoying the attention. I knew Dad treated us differently. But I never had the courage to speak up." I nodded. "I don't blame you. We were all trying to earn the same thing. Our father's approval." For the first time in years, my brother and I embraced. The room broke into gentle applause. Not because I had become wealthy. Not because I owned a successful company. But because a broken family was finally beginning to heal. My father looked around the room and spoke one last time. "I've spent years telling everyone which son made me proud." He paused and smiled through his tears. "Tonight, I'm proud of both of my sons." The room erupted into applause. And for the first time since I was a little boy, those words felt real. That night ended very differently than anyone had expected. The conversations were no longer about success, or money, or business. They were about family. For the first time in years, everyone sat together without comparing one another. No one asked who earned the most. No one talked about titles or achievements. Instead, they laughed. They shared old memories. And they remembered what truly mattered. As the guests slowly began to leave, my father walked outside with me. The cool evening air filled the silence between us. After a few moments, he spoke. "I missed so many years of your life. I was so focused on who I wanted you to become, that I never appreciated who you already were." I smiled gently. "We can't change the past, Dad. But we can decide what happens next." He nodded. "I'd like that." A few weeks later, my father visited my company's headquarters for the very first time. He met my employees. He saw the offices. He watched people greet me with respect, not because they feared me, but because they trusted me. On the drive home, he quietly admitted, "Now I understand something. A true leader doesn't build success by making others feel small. He builds success by helping others grow." Those words meant more to me than any business award I had ever received. Months passed, and our family slowly grew closer. My brother and I started spending more time together. My mother smiled more than she had in years. And my father. He stopped asking people what they did for a living before asking who they were. Sometimes, life doesn't give us the parents we hoped for. Sometimes, parents make painful mistakes. But people can change. If they are willing to face the truth. As for me, I never built my company to prove anyone wrong. I built it because I believed every person deserves the chance to create their own future. If there's one lesson my journey taught me, it's this. Never let someone else's opinion become your limit. The people who doubt you today may one day become the people who admire your courage. Keep learning. Keep working. Keep believing. Because your greatest success doesn't begin the day the world believes in you. It begins the day you believe in yourself. Thank you for listening. And remember, your story is still being written. A few days after my father's birthday, I thought life would return to normal. I went back to my office, attended meetings, and focused on preparing for our international expansion. Then something unexpected happened. One of my cousins uploaded a photo from the birthday party. It showed Richard Hayes shaking my hand while my family stood in complete shock. The caption read, "The family member everyone called a failure, turned out to be the most successful of us all." Within hours, the post spread across social media. Thousands of people shared it. Comments poured in from strangers around the world. Never judge someone too early. This story inspired me to keep chasing my dream. I needed this today. At first, I ignored the attention. I had never wanted fame. I only wanted to build something meaningful. But the internet had other plans. A local newspaper contacted my assistant. Then a business magazine requested an interview. Soon after, television networks wanted to hear my story. I accepted only one interview. Not because I wanted publicity, but because I hoped someone watching would refuse to give up on their own dream. During the interview, the host asked, "So, what did success feel like when your family finally believed in you?" I smiled before answering. Success didn't begin that night. It began years earlier. When I kept working even though nobody believed in me. The interview quickly became one of the most watched business stories of the month. Messages flooded my inbox. Students. Young entrepreneurs. Single parents. People who had. Success attracts many things. Opportunity. Respect. Attention. But it also attracts jealousy. A week after my interview aired, my assistant walked into my office carrying a folder. "Mr. Carter," she said. "There's someone asking a lot of questions about our company." "Who?" She placed the folder on my desk. "The CEO of Titan Innovations. Victor Reynolds." I had heard his name before. Victor was known for buying smaller companies, crushing competitors, and doing whatever it took to stay on top. He wasn't interested in fair competition. He believed winning was all that mattered. At first, I ignored it. After all, successful companies always had competitors. But then strange things started happening. One of our biggest clients suddenly canceled a long-term contract. Another investor backed out of an important project without giving any explanation. Rumors about our company began appearing online. Anonymous posts claimed we were unstable. Others claimed we were about to go bankrupt. None of it was true. Yet the damage was real. Some employees became worried. A few clients started asking difficult questions. For the first time in years, I could feel pressure building from every direction. During our weekly leadership meeting, everyone looked at me, waiting for answers. I stood up and looked around the room. "I won't lie to you," I said. "We're under attack. But we will not respond with fear. We will respond with honesty, hard work, and excellence." The room grew quiet. Then one employee stood and applauded. Another joined. Soon, everyone in the room was clapping. That moment reminded me of something important. A company is never built by one person. It's built by people who believe in the same mission. That evening, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Richard Hayes. "Ethan," he said. "I've done some digging. The rumors aren't random. They're being spread by someone with a very clear goal." I already knew the answer before he said the name. "Victor Reynolds." Richard sighed. "Yes. And I don't think this is the end." As I looked out of my office window at the city lights, I realized my biggest challenge had never been proving my family wrong. My biggest challenge was only just beginning. The following Monday began like any other. I arrived at the office before sunrise, coffee in one hand and a notebook in the other. But something felt different. The usual energy inside the building had disappeared. Employees were whispering. Phones were ringing non-stop. As soon as I stepped into my office, my assistant rushed in. "Mr. Carter, we've got a serious problem." She handed me a report. Overnight, 3 of our biggest clients had received anonymous emails claiming our company had committed financial fraud. The accusations were completely false. But in business, even a lie can cause damage if enough people believe it. Within hours, several news websites picked up the rumors. Investors started calling. Clients demanded explanations. Some employees feared they might lose their jobs. I gathered the entire leadership team in the conference room. Everyone looked nervous. Some suggested filing lawsuits immediately. Others wanted to respond publicly and attack our competitor. I listened carefully. Then I stood up. "We're not going to panic." The room fell silent. "We've spent 6 years building trust. We're not going to destroy that trust by reacting with anger." Instead, I gave everyone clear instructions. The legal team would investigate the source of the false information. Our customer support team would personally call every major client. The finance department would prepare complete financial records to prove our transparency. And I would face the media myself. That afternoon, cameras were waiting outside our headquarters. Reporters shouted questions as I walked toward the entrance. "Mr. Carter, are the accusations true? Is your company hiding financial problems?" I stopped, looked directly into the cameras, and calmly answered. "The truth doesn't become weaker because someone spreads a lie. We have nothing to hide. Every document, every report, and every financial record will be available for independent review. No excuses. No secrets. Only facts." The interview spread across the country within hours. Instead of sounding defensive, I sounded confident. Because confidence comes naturally when you're telling the truth. Late that evening, Richard Hayes called again. "Ethan," he said. "Our investigators have found something." The anonymous emails. They were sent through a company secretly connected to Victor Reynolds. I closed my eyes for a moment. The attack I had expected had finally begun. But Victor had made one mistake. He thought he was fighting someone who would give up under pressure. He had no idea. Pressure was exactly what had made me who I was. The next morning, our legal team arrived with undeniable evidence. Every fake article. Every anonymous email. Every false accusation. Led back to companies secretly controlled by Victor Reynolds. For weeks, he had tried to destroy everything we had built. Not because we had done anything wrong, but because he couldn't accept that a smaller company had become stronger than his. Richard Hayes looked at me and smiled. "You have enough evidence to take him to court." I nodded. "But this isn't about revenge. It's about protecting the truth." Within hours, our lawyers filed the case. News outlets quickly changed their headlines. The same reporters who had questioned our integrity were now exposing the campaign against us. Victor Reynolds denied everything. But the evidence was overwhelming. Emails, Financial records. Witness statements. There was nowhere left to hide. A month later, the court delivered its decision. Victor's companies were ordered to pay millions of dollars in damages. Several of his major business partners ended their contracts with him. His reputation, built over decades, collapsed in a matter of weeks. The day the verdict was announced, reporters gathered outside our headquarters once again. One journalist asked, "Mr. Carter, after everything Victor Reynolds did to you, what would you like to say to him?" I paused for a moment before answering. I don't hate him. Hate only creates more hate. I hope one day he realizes that destroying others will never build lasting success. The interview spread across the country. People expected anger. Instead, they saw forgiveness. That evening, I stood alone in my office, looking out over the city lights. 6 years earlier, I had been sitting in a tiny apartment with an old laptop, wondering if I should give up. Now, our company had become stronger than ever. Not because we defeated a rival, but because we never abandoned our values. As I turned off the lights and prepared to go home, my phone rang. It was my father. His voice sounded warm. "Ethan, your mother and I are waiting for you. Come home for dinner." This time, it wasn't an invitation filled with judgment. It was an invitation filled with love. And for the first time in many years, home finally felt like home.